Hello students, now let's study the second type of complex permanent tissue, that is phloem. This phloem is also called as leptome. The term phloem is given by the scientist Nageli, whereas the term leptome is given by the scientist Haberland. Okay, right. So what is the function of phloem? Function of phloem is to conduct food materials. The function of phloem is to conduct or to translocate food materials from one part of the plant to another part of the plant. That is from towards growing parts of the plant, or from the site of food synthesis, that is from leaves to towards storage organs, or towards the site where they are utilized, that is growing parts of the plant. So function of phloem is to translocate or to transport food materials. Transport food through it. Okay, this phloem is made up of 4 different types of cells. So phloem consists of 4 types of elements or 4 types of cells. These 4 types of cells are sieve tubes, companion cells, and phloem parenchyma, and phloem fibers. So these are 4 different types of elements or cells present in phloem. Now let's make a comparative study of 4 different types of elements present in the phloem with respect to basic features. Sieve tubes are living cells. Then companion cells are also living cells at maturity. Phloem parenchyma is also made of living cells, and even phloem fibers are dead cells. Okay, at maturity they become dead. Next, coming to next difference with respect to cell wall. So sieve tubes are thin walled. Companion cells are also thin walled. Cell wall is thin walled. And then coming to phloem parenchyma is also thin walled. Phloem fibers are thick walled. These are thick walled cells. Right. Next, coming to what type of cells are present in phloem in gymnosperms and in angiosperms. In gymnosperms, sieve tubes are absent. Instead of sieve tubes, sieve cells are present. Next, in gymnosperms, companion cells are absent. Instead of companion cells, albuminous cells are present. Next, coming to phloem parenchyma and phloem fibers are present in gymnosperms, in the phloem of gymnosperms. In the phloem of angiosperms, I am writing angiosperms. All these 4 different types of cells are present, that is sieve tubes, companion cells, phloem parenchyma and phloem fibers are present. Whereas, okay, let's study the function of all these 4 different types of elements present in phloem. So function of sieve tubes is to transport or to translocate food. And function of companion cells is to help these sieve tubes in transport of food materials through them. So they are called companion, accessory cells, helper cells, because they are helping the sieve tubes to transport the food materials through them. Because sieve tubes lack nucleus. Actually, all the activities of the cell are controlled by the brain of the cell, that is nucleus. In case of sieve tubes, nucleus is absent. So the activities which are taking place, that is transport of food, is the activity which is taking place inside the sieve tube, is controlled, regulated by the nucleus of companion cell. Hence, these companion cells are called as helper cells. And even albuminous cells are also helper cells which help sieve cells, through which transport of food takes place. But these albuminous cells are not called as true companion cells. These are not true companion cells. I will explain why they are not true companion cells in the forthcoming part of this lecture. Right. So these are helper cells. They help these seed tubes for the transport of food materials through them. Next is phloem parenchyma. Phloem parenchyma is involved in storage of food storage. And then phloem fibers. Phloem fibers are involved in providing mechanical support, mechanical strength. And this phloem is also called as bast. The other name of this phloem is, it can be called as leptome and it can also be called as bast. Right? Okay, so now let's study all these elements of phloem, cells of phloem in detail one by one. Let's start with seed tubes first. Okay, now let's start with phloem seed tubes. So phloem seed tubes are formed by the joining of several thin-walled cells called sieve tube members or sieve tube elements. So phloem sieve tubes are tube-like structures formed by the joining or union of several, that is many cells, thin-walled cells called sieve tube members or sieve tube elements. Right, let's see how they are formed, sieve tubes. Okay, let's say this is the structure of sieve tube. So in this sieve tube, this is one sieve tube member. This is another sieve tube member, like this, another sieve tube member. Like this, sieve tube is formed by the joining of several thin-walled sieve tube members at their end walls or cross walls. These are radial walls or longitudinal walls. These are tangential walls or cross walls or end walls. So what are these walls? These are cross walls or end walls. So when these cross walls or end walls of these sieve tube elements are joined with one another to form a tube-like structure called sieve tube, there is formation of pores, and these pores are called as sieve pores. So these pores are called as sieve pores. Now this sieve plate which is with pores is sieve, this cross wall or end wall which is with pores is called as sieve plate. Cross wall or end wall which is with pores called sieve pores is called as sieve plate. So what is the function of the sieve pores present in sieve plate? Function of sieve pores is to connect the cytoplasm, protoplasm or cytoplasm of one sieve element, one sieve element or sieve tube member with the another sieve tube member of a sieve tube, right? I just repeat, the function of sieve pore is to connect the cytoplasm of one sieve tube member with the another sieve tube member present in the same sieve tube, right? Okay, so here cytoplasmic strands, that is plasmodesmatic connection. Cytoplasmic strands extend between the sieve pores of one sieve tube member with to the another sieve tube member present in the same sieve tube. Cytoplasmic threads or cytoplasmic strands extend between, that is membranes, extends between the pores of one sieve tube element and the other sieve tube element to connect the cytoplasm of one sieve tube element with the another sieve tube element present in the same sieve tube, through which transport of food materials occurs from one sieve tube element to the another sieve tube element present in the same sieve tube. I just repeat. So this is the sieve tube formed by the joining of several sieve tube elements or sieve tube members at their end walls or cross walls. Where they are joined, there is formation of pores which are called sieve pores, and the end walls or cross walls which are with sieve pores are called sieve plates. Function of sieve pores is to connect the cytoplasm of one sieve member with the another sieve member present in the same sieve tube. So here, in between the sieve pores of one sieve member to the another sieve member, cytoplasmic strands or threads are extending, through which transport of food is taking place from one sieve member to the another sieve member present inside the same sieve tube. Right. Okay, so at maturity, the sieve tube, at maturity, sieve tube consists of peripheral cytoplasm. That means cytoplasm is towards peripheral sites. Peripheral cytoplasm, large vacuole, and it is with large vacuole, and there is no nucleus. Nucleus gets degenerated. Okay, at maturity. And here, the sieve tubes consists of P proteins, special type of proteins called P proteins, which are nothing but phloem proteins. P proteins, which are phloem proteins. So let's see the function of these phloem proteins. Functions. Phloem proteins are involved in, they help in translocation or transport of food through these sieve tubes. So first function is they help in transport or translocation of food through these sieve tubes. That is the first function. And for this translocation, they are ATP dependent. For the translocation or transport of food material through sieve tubes, phloem proteins, P proteins are helpful, and the functioning of these P proteins which are involved in helping these sieve tubes for the transport of food is ATP dependent, energy dependent. Right. Next function is to heal. To heal the cracks. These proteins are also involved in healing of cracks or breaks or damages which are caused inside the sieve tube. Right. So this is about phloem proteins. Along with phloem proteins, I want to discuss one more point here, that is callose plugs. Callose plugs. So actually, during unfavorable conditions are nothing but late growing season. The season in which growth of plant is not taking place. Formation of new leaves is not taking place. So during unfavorable conditions, when the growth of plant is not taking place, transport of food through this sieve tube must be reduced. So for the reduction of transport of food, translocation of food through these sieve tubes, there is a protein called callose protein. Callose protein blocks these pores, sieve pores. When the callose protein is blocking the sieve pores, what happens? There is blockage of transport. There is the transport of food materials will be stopped. Okay, and hence as these callose proteins are blocking or preventing the transport of food material through sieve tubes, they are also called as callose plugs. Callose plugs. Are you getting my point? So during unfavorable conditions, that means the conditions when the plant is not showing any growth, when there is no formation of new leaves, there will be no need of transport of food materials through these sieve tubes from one part to the other part, that is from leaves, photosynthesizing parts to the growing parts. Under these conditions, the proteins called callose proteins are blocking the sieve pores, and hence the transport of food materials through sieve tubes will be stopped, prevented, and hence these callose proteins are also called as callose plugs. Okay, so formation of callose plugs. Formation of callose plugs is taking place during unfavorable conditions. Unfavorable conditions are nothing but late growing season. When the growth of plant is not taking place, when there is no formation of new leaves. Late growing season. Right. So Okay, this is about unfavorable conditions. Now coming to favorable conditions. So during favorable conditions, what happens? Formation of new leaves occurs inside the plant, on the plant. So for the formation of new leaves and for the growth of plant, what is required? Food is required. Food need to be transported through these sieve tubes. So when the food need to be transported through these sieve tubes, dissolution of callose plugs is taking place. So the callose plugs which have blocked the seed pores undergo dissolution, breakdown, so that the pores get opened. When the pores get opened, what happens? Transport of food will be taking place through these sieve tubes from one sieve member to the another sieve member, through the another sieve member present in the sieve tube. So dissolution of seed tubes is taking place during favorable conditions. Favorable conditions are nothing but the conditions growing season. What is that season? Spring season or growing season. Spring or growing season. Right? So this is all about seed tube, which is involved in translocation of food materials from one point to the another point. Now let's study companion cells in little bit more detail.